America is said to be a place of opportunity, leading the world in technology, sports, consumerism, and gross domestic product. Despite this, the United States remains number one in the world for incarceration. With a population of 318.9 million people, the U.S. has 2,220,300 people currently incarcerated, according to the U.S. Bureau of Justice. That translates to almost 1% of the total population in prison. An additional 4,751,000 people are either on probation or parole. Although many different types of Americans go through the criminal justice system, the effects of it are not seen fairly or equally. American jails are overwhelmingly filled with people who have little money and who have had neither a quality education nor access to good jobs. In 2014, incarcerated people had a median annual income of $19,185 prior to their incarceration, which is 41% less than non-incarcerated people of similar ages. The gap in income is not solely the product of the well-documented disproportionate incarceration of Black people and Hispanic people, who generally earn less than white people. Instead, incarcerated people in all gender, race, and ethnicity groups earn substantially less prior to their incarceration than their non-incarcerated counterparts of similar ages. What, then, is the connection between wealth and legal processes? What is the connection between poverty and individuals' experiences with the criminal justice system?
What are the costs associated with being charged with a crime? Like, so from being arrested to whatever, like to like all the way to like the courtroom to like even if you end up being incarcerated, like the different costs associated with that.
Yeah, so at least in the United States, when you're accused of a crime, you have a right to a public attorney, public defender, so that you don't have to pay those costs to have someone defend you. But often you can't afford to pay bail, or if you pay bail, you have to get a private person, someone to, someone else to pay your bail for you, and so you have to wait in jail for a very long time, and it can take 2 years for a criminal case to come to court. And so you have to just sit in jail while you're waiting for that, or figure out a way to pay it. And that can be really expensive. Whereas most people, even in the middle class, you don't have to be rich, would be able to pay bail and wait for those 2 years while they were waiting for the case. They would be out and working and being with their family and all that kind of stuff. So even though you have a lawyer who's appointed to you, that doesn't necessarily make it speedy, and you may have to sit in jail. And that often encourages people to accept a plea bargain.
Okay.
Because then, like, let's say I'm innocent, and the guy says, well, 2 years from now you can prove that you're innocent. Or you can say that you're guilty of a not quite so serious crime, and then you can just get out right away. And then I say, all right, I'm guilty of the not so serious crime. But then now what I didn't realize is that I have a crime on my record, which makes I can't get a job.
The registration has been revoked or something, but then your children need to go to school. You need to go to work. You need to buy food. So you take the chance, okay, I'm going to go with this revoked registration or license. And then you have piled on, but you have no recourse because you don't have the money to pay. So, and then when you get to court, then they put another fine on top of that. So it's just a vicious, and you don't have the money, you can't get out, you can't go to work. So it's a vicious cycle and you're stuck.
Let's examine this vicious cycle and how it came to be. Beginning in the 1970s, the prison population began swelling and climbing through 2009. Now, this nation imprisons more of its residents than any other. The United States jails a quarter of the world's prisoners, although it only contains 5% of the world's total population. Incarceration in the United States is socially concentrated among very disadvantaged people. According to Bruce Western, Harvard sociology professor, the expansion of the criminal justice system was a response not just to the problem of crime, but to a whole array of social problems associated with the uniquely harsh conditions of American poverty. Today, the majority of crimes committed are nonviolent drug offenses, whether that be in impoverished areas or non-impoverished areas. Marijuana is a very common drug offense, the most common in fact. Drug offenses make up 46.4% of current charges. Most nonviolent crimes like drugs see a cycle of getting into the illegal activity to make money, either getting incarcerated or taking a plea bargain, both of which go on your record. Upon release, you're put back into impoverished conditions, and when you find no money for rehab, no enrichment opportunity, and you need money, you're cycling back into this illegal activity. The current justice system criminalizes poverty in a way that makes it more likely for you to get in trouble with the law when you're poor, but also harder to move past a run-in with the law and back into society. This is seen with things like the arrests of homeless people and people feeding the homeless, or the influx of poor people into prisons can partially be explained by the prison industrial complex that uses insourcing to make lots of money for companies while paying inmates only a few cents an hour. This valuable cheap labor causes police to go into the same impoverished neighborhoods to get people on nonviolent offenses and continue to feed the prison industrial complex. Quotas and mandatory sentencings also play a role. Quotas making cops fill a certain number of people to arrest a day, while mandatory sentencings mean that regardless of how you commit certain offenses, you have to serve a certain amount of time in jail for them.
It's not the case that poor people commit crimes and rich people don't, but it builds up more quickly. The consequences build up much more quickly for poor people, and it's much harder for them to get a job and all that kind of stuff. So it's just that the system ends up being more severe on poor people. It is true that with mandatory sentencing and sort of different fines for different types of drugs, that it's almost as if they're targeting poor people. One of the ways in which it's unfair for poor children, that their parents have to be perfect. I mean, basically everyone says, well, then why did they commit the crime? And it's like, well, they have to be absolutely perfect to avoid anything like this. And sometimes they are perfect and they still get charged with a crime.
If you go into a poor neighborhood, the perception is that you are a criminal. Okay. And you already have something weighed against you. So when it starts out, instead of de-escalating the situation, then you're as a police officer should, then many times he escalates it by accusing you of something you didn't do. If you reach for something, then you are a threat to his life, and thereby people have gotten killed. And the criminal justice system, okay, especially when it comes to the police, then it puts the poor person and people of color to defend against a feeling, not the crime. They got to try and defend against, I felt my life was threatened. How do you do that? That's too abstract. That's too subjective.
Some believe that poor people put these situations upon themselves by committing crimes and not working hard enough to rehabilitate themselves, ignoring the opportunities people with higher incomes have that allow them so many chances. In the name of being tough on crime, American society has made a series of policy choices that have fueled a cycle of poverty and incarceration. America's mass incarceration policies are tangled in history, politics, social conflict, and inequality. One overarching way to reduce the crime problem is to work and help individuals after they leave prison. Federal, state, and local governments can repeal laws restricting incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people's access to things like welfare, public housing, and Pell Grants. Successfully targeting crime would have to include effective social services, early education initiatives, access to health care and mental health services, and more housing and job opportunities, but this investment is well worth it in order to end an era of mass incarceration and the targeting of impoverished neighborhoods.
And in fact, in strong opposition to this so-called crime prevention bill. Mr. Speaker, let us be honest, this is not a crime prevention bill. This is a punishment bill, a retribution bill, a vengeance bill. All over the industrialized world now, countries are saying, let us put an end to state murder, let us stop capital punishment, but here what we're talking about is more and more capital punishment. What we're discussing now is an issue where some of our friends are saying, we're not getting tough enough on the criminals. But my friends, we have the highest percentage of people in America in jail per capita of any industrialized nation on earth. We've beaten South Africa. We've beaten the Soviet Union. What do we have to do? Put half the country behind bars? Mr. Speaker, instead of talking about punishment and vengeance, let us have the courage to talk about the real issue. How do we get to the root causes of crime? How do we stop crime, which is in fact a very, very serious problem in this country? And Mr. Speaker, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with a president and a Congress which allows 5 million children to go hungry, 2 million people to sleep out on the streets, cities to become breeding grounds for drugs and violence. And they say, we're getting tough on crime. If you want to get tough on crime, let's deal with the causes of crime. Let's demand that every man, woman, and child in this country have a decent opportunity and a decent standard of living. Let's not keep putting poor people into jail and disproportionately punishing blacks.
Time of the gentleman has expired.